All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mitchell McGonigal, and today we're going to be doing our week 2 of the Silver CY SBL Cracker Barrel. It's a pleasure to have you all with us. Um, each week we'll be covering a different topic on our SBL Cracker Barrel, and this week we'll be talking about authoritarian leadership. So there's a lot of different pros and cons that we're going to go throughout our conversation tonight. But first, we're going to get things started with introductions. As I mentioned, my name is Mitchell McGonigal. I'm the Medicine Bow Camp Director here at Yawgoo Scout Reservation. I've worked in the CIT Corps in the past. I've been a program commissioner, and I've also worked as a program commissioner at camp. I'm an Eagle Scout out of Troop 1 Bellingham, and I've been an SBL patrol leader. So I've had a lot of leadership experience, and I'm really excited to share that with you all tonight. Let's see. Can we pass things over? Brennan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everybody. My name is Brennan Reynolds. I'm the 3-Point Camp Director here at Yawgoo Scout Reservation. I've worked on staff here for 9 summers. I spent 7 of those summers working in administration Camp 3-Point, so I have a lot 3-Point and Camp Sandy Beach. So I have a lot of experience in leadership working there, as well as I was an assistant senior patrol leader for my troop, as well as a JASM.
All right, Matt, are you on there?
Yes, I am. How's it going, everybody? My name is Matt Delva. I'm the Assistant Camp Director of Camp Medicine Bow. I've worked in administration for the past couple of years, but before that, I worked previously in the barn, and I'm an Eagle Scout out of Troop 1 Arnold Mills in Cumberland.
And Quentin.
Everyone, I'm Quentin Reynolds. I've worked at camp for 7 years now. I'm the Sandy Beach Camp Director. I have worked quite a few places over camp, but over 7 years, I did a few in administration and a few at Campcraft, a few at the waterfront, well, one at the waterfront. I'm an Eagle Scout of Troop 1 Richmond. I was the SPL there for a year, so that was fun. But I'm super excited to do this webinar.
All right, so as I mentioned, today we're going to be talking about authoritarian leadership. Just so everybody knows, we'll have a question and answer segment at the end. If you have any kind of questions about leadership in general, about authoritarian leadership, please feel free to drop that in our Q&A box down below, and we'll get to that at the end. So I'd like to start off with kind of an overview of authoritarian leadership. This is a leadership style where it's very much, there's a boss and then there's the rest of the group. But there's that one leader who's in charge. You could almost compare it to like a dictator. That person is in charge, they have absolute power, and it's very much important to get results done. It's all about results. It may not be the most fun style to be a part of, but you know, it can also have results and have positive impacts when it's used correctly. Every leadership style that we overviewed this summer will have pros and cons and situations where they're very effective and some that they're not. So we'd like to just make sure you have this style in your toolbox so you know when it's appropriate to use. Some examples where this style is very effective would be like manufacturing, construction, the military. Basically, you do what you're told and you have to do it at a high level. There's not a lot of back and forth between workers and boss or the senior patrol leader and the scouts necessarily. It's all about getting things done effectively and fast. There's not that communication that usually helps people grow as leaders. It's a lot more of just, let's go, let's get things done. So to talk about some of the really good things about this leadership style, we have Quentin Reynolds.
So some of the benefits to the authoritarian perspective, I guess, leadership style, is that it's very easy. There's nothing really complex about it. You know, you got your person at the that's taking charge, and then everybody else that's listening to them. So it's not that hard to understand or to cooperate with. So that point is, you know, definitely in favor of the authoritarian view. If you have a group of people who maybe are new to whatever the situation may be, it would be easier and more efficient sometimes for somebody to just take charge and put people in the places that they need to be and make those decisions. Sometimes that happens in emergency situations, which I know we'll talk about later. But it is good for quick decision making. Instead of having a group of people, multiple people, all trying to make a decision at one time, that can take some time trying to cooperate with one another, and then also picking the decision that most people are in favor of or what have you. Just having one person step up and say, I'm going to make the decisions, we'll get it done much faster and much easier. Something that we have here at camp and is pretty universal is something called the chain of command. How the chain of command works is if you're working for somebody, there's a chain in which you communicate with those people. So for instance, here on staff, say the lifeguards at the waterfront, they work and communicate with the waterfront director. And then the waterfront director works with the camp director. So if somebody at the waterfront that is a lifeguard needs something to be done or has an issue, they can bring it up to their immediate director, who's the waterfront director. And the waterfront director can do their best to handle it. If they can't handle it, then they bring it up to the camp director, and the camp director will handle it. In this authoritarian style of leadership, the chain of command is one link. It's just you and the person who is in charge. Or if you're the person in charge, everybody just talks directly to you. Make communication easier, and less things can get misconstrued, I guess is how I would say it. So there's that pro to it as well, that it's a little bit easier to communicate on that level. Like I said before, if it's a group of people that are new to a job or whatever they're doing, it's easier to have that one person step up and just directly lead them. So if they have a low skill level and they need a lot of direction, just taking charge and delegating and putting people in places. So it has the opportunity to be a very productive leadership method. But as we are about to talk about with Brennan, it has some attributes from it that aren't so likable. We might call them cons. So to talk about the cons of authoritarian leadership, I'm going to pass this over to Brennan.
Thanks, Quentin. So like Quentin said, there's a lot of pros, there's a lot of cons, as is true with everything. When we start getting into and talking about authoritarian leadership, there's really a lack of creativity. There's not one team coming up with the best answer or coming up with the right answer, or people bouncing ideas off of each other and brainstorming. It's just one person just dictating, this is what we're going to do, this is how it's going to go, and what I says goes. There's not a lot of room for feedback and not a lot of room for people to pitch ideas. It's just one person coming up with the idea and moving forward with it. So there really is no creativity in it. It's just one person doing it. It can be demotivating, not necessarily for the person that's in charge or for the leader, but for the people, the subordinates, the people that are below the leader. It's demotivating. They feel like they're not heard, they're not respected, that they're not cared about. My boss doesn't care about me, those sorts of things. So it's really demotivating to work for someone that's an authoritarian leadership, which is why, as we kind of talked about earlier, it's a great tool to have and be able to use, because sometimes it's necessary, but it's not something you want to be doing all the time, because you're really going to not have people listening to you and wanting to work for you, which in the long run is a negative. Typically the person that's in charge will come off passive aggressive or bossy type of a scenario. There's always that big picture, that big chart out there that shows a leader pulling people up the pile, and then there's the boss pushing everybody off. The difference between a boss and a leader. And the authoritarian style of leadership is very much a boss. It's what they say goes. I'm the boss, I'm in large and in charge, and this is what's going to happen. And like I said earlier, feelings are undervalued, working underneath them. And a con for the leader is there's a lot of pressure on you. You're making all the decisions. Everything falls straight on top of you. You don't have a team supporting you. You don't have people that have your back or anything like that. So there's a lot of pressure on you as a leader to get the job done. Everybody is literally looking right at you. The chain of command is looking right at you. There's no one else to help you with your stress, no one to bounce ideas off of or, vent to type of a thing. So there's a lot of pressure to be an authoritarian leader as well, which, will put more stress on you, and then you'll probably react frustrated towards your subordinates. And then, they'll feel even more unmotivated, and they'll feel like you're even more passive aggressive and don't care about them. So this is really something you want to use in very specific types of situations. Emergency situations are one of those prime examples. The decision needs to be made. It needs to be made now. It just needs to happen. There's no time, to even think sometimes when we get into these emergency situations. And we're here at camp and we have to mobilize to the dining hall. The reservation director doesn't call the camp director's like, so what do you guys think? He just pushes the alarm and we know what to do. There's no time to think or react. You just have to do. And one person needs to be the point man or the point person. They need to be in charge to make those decisions because they need to happen very quick. There's not, the creative process is a long process, and we can't sit down and be creative initially, in an emergency situation. And the chain of command is very straightforward in an emergency situation. It's one person talking to another group of people, talking to their group of people. With that straight line of communication, that whatever is being communicating is being delivered effectively. There's not the game of telephone being played or someone hearing it from somebody else just going straight out. So again, we talked about one of the pros of authoritarian leadership being communication. And in communication is super important in an emergency situation when things need to get done and get done quickly. Another great time, for you senior patrol leaders out there is when you're working with your new scouts. They may not know how everything goes, or they may not 100% understand. So you kind of need to be more of a direct leader with them reporting to you because they don't know or have a great enough understanding to be creative and have some of those crazy ideas. But I will stress to you that it's still important to make sure that they feel heard with some of their concerns and take feedback as a leader. As leaders, we're always learning. We're always looking for ways to improve. And one of the greatest instances for me in learning to improve was probably a time where I relied on authoritarian leadership way too much. In 2014, I was the assistant camp director down at the Campcraft Center. One of the biggest things we have to do at camp is the paperwork, and we need to deliver all our paperwork for the merit badges. It's a very time-sensitive procedure and needs to be done correctly because literally people's Eagle Scout ranks depend on this. If I mess up my camping merit badge roster and someone doesn't get their camping merit badge and can't make Eagle because of it, that's on me. So it's a lot of stress. We had a staff member join us late in the summer. So everybody else was on one level when it came to paperwork, and he was a bit below just because he had just started. And he messed up his paperwork pretty bad. I worked through part of my day off to fix it. I was up late at night trying to fix it. And, I'll be straight up. I yelled at him. And he felt bullied. He felt that he was, not cared about, that no one cared about him. And he almost wanted to quit staff. And then that broke my heart because I love working here. And I couldn't imagine me being the reason someone wants to not work here. It really broke my heart. And it took a lot of reflection for me to realize, oh no, I was in the wrong. I never taught him properly. It was his first time doing something, and I just came off way too authoritarian on everything. And, it almost cost us having one of the greatest staff members we ever had. So there's a lot of cons to it. And, it's something great to have in your back pocket, but really make sure you're wise when you're choosing to use your authoritarian leadership style. Because if used too much, you're really going to demotivate the people working for you, and they're not going to really respect you as much. And ultimately, that's going to affect your productivity, and things aren't going to get done, and people aren't going to like you. So, Mitch, I'm going to send it back over to you.
All right, I'm actually going to pass it over to Matt, and he's going to talk a little bit about really effective situations to use the authoritarian leadership style, and maybe a little bit of a recap as well. Matt? If you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself, there we go.
So like Brennan just touched upon, emergency situations is probably one of the key situations in which the authoritarian leadership style is probably the go-to, just because there's not too much time to act. or too much time to think about making decisions. You kind of just make the first rational decision. And so one common example of this is like when you're learning about like first aid. When there is some kind of medical emergency, if there's like a group of people, you don't just necessarily say call 911 to the entire group, because nothing's necessarily going to get done. So you want to single out one specific person and tell them to call 911, because that way that everyone knows that person is going to call 911. There's no miscommunication and everyone thinking, oh, someone else will do it. So once again, emergency situations is probably one of those key situations in which the authoritarian leadership style would be the go-to. And another part of emergency situations is just making sure that all the information is flowing to one person. As Quentin touched upon a little bit earlier, the authoritarian leadership style really is just those two links. It's kind of the leader and then any person who's working under that leader. And so there's really a smooth flow of information between those two links in the chain, rather than it going to everyone except for the leader. So it's really, really important that the leader is able to get all that information so that they are able to assess the situation and make the best possible decision. And as Brendan touched upon, just another scenario is just when you have inexperienced or low-skilled members. It is very easy to start off with that authoritarian leadership style until they do build up their experience or build up their skill and comfort within a certain area. And sometimes you might find this within your troop. I know personally from my experience, when I was a little bit younger in my troop, we kind of, when you have like your troop guide, kind of like your troop guide, like what they would say would go. And I know that there was a little bit more structure when I was a younger scout. And then as I got older, it became more of youth leading youth, and then just having the adults there for guidance. But now I'm just going to pass it over to Mitch to go over the recap.
All right, thank you, Matt, and thank you, everyone. So the authoritarian leadership style is, once again, there are positives and there are negatives to the style. Positives are that it's really effective when there need to be quick decisions like Matt touched on. But if that is a consistent theme in the troop, in your gathering, in your group, it can be kind of demotivating and difficult to be a part of as a team member. It might be easier as the leader where, you're the one just telling everyone what to do. But when you're just on one end of that, the receiving end, sometimes that can be kind of frustrating when your voice doesn't always get heard. Something I really like to tell the Yagyu Leadership Experience Scouts is that, leading is more than just telling people what to do. It's guiding and developing people. And this is definitely a very valuable tool to have in your toolbox, and it's worth learning, but it's not something I would always recommend to use, and it definitely wouldn't be the first leadership style I would recommend to you. That being said, though, definitely learn it, understand its limits, and know when it's effective. So at this time, I'd like to open it up to our question and answer segment. If you have any questions about leadership in general, authoritarian leadership, please send them our way. I do have one. Let me see. Have you ever used this leadership style before? So I think Brennan touched on it. Brennan, what were really your key takeaways from your experience with authoritarian leadership, and what did you learn?
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. So I've learned a lot, honestly, from authoritarian leadership. Last summer, one of the big things that pops into my head is we had a mobilization here at camp due to severe weather, and we had to mobilize to the dining halls right during the Monday night campfire, and it fell on me to make sure that everything went off. We had to turn a dining hall into an amphitheater, and it had to happen quick. We had to make these quick decisions and make sure everything else in camp was good to go and that we were going to put on a stellar program. In that instance, it worked great. We had raving comments and compliments about across the entire reservation about how well we did. But like I mentioned earlier, I also had a negative experience with it where I was too hard on someone and I relied on my authoritarian leadership a bit too much. And it honestly had a negative impact. So you just got to really make sure you're picking the right times, and you're going to learn. There's going to be a time where you do something with a non-authoritarian style, like, wow, I should have done this a bit more authoritarian, or it's going to go vice versa. It's just learning to learn about when's the appropriate times to do it. And it's really hard to determine. All these different leadership styles we're going to cover all summer all intermingle, and they're all just a giant web of trying to figure out when to use which style and when to do it. And even, my version of being authoritarian leader might be a bit different from Mitch's and Quinton's and Matt's, because we're all just different people with different personalities. So it really is a big learning curve of learning when to do it when. But if just learning from your mistakes and look back and reflect on every action you made as a leader in order to make your next action as a leader an even better one. Thanks, Mitch.
All right. Yeah, Brennan, I think that's a really great point, especially that, that time to sit back and think about, what you did well, what you didn't do well. I think that's really key because you might not realize it in the moment, if something really went well or isn't going well, but when you can kind of sit back and think about it and even talk to some of your group members, I wouldn't say that's necessarily a strength of authoritarian leadership, but it's helpful as a leader to know, what was the perception and what they felt you did well and didn't do well. So moving on, we have a question from Matthew, who asked, would you say scouting has an authoritarian system because there are multiple layers of leadership and scouting that work together? Let's see. Is there anyone who would like to take that question?
I can take a stab at it. So I don't know if I'd say that scouting is an authoritarian system because there's multiple layers. Yes, there's multiple layers, like you said. Like, let me just pull up your question so I can see it. There's multiple layers in leadership and scouting, but it is not a one person making decisions on their own and then passing them down. For example, on the national level, there's the national scouting executive, and they make a lot of calls, but they have a team that they work with to make those decisions. And it's the same thing on our local level. We have a scouting executive, and they have a team that works for a council, and they make decisions together, and they each have a piece of responsibilities that they're in charge of, so while there's the scouting executive, there's also the director of camping, and the director of camping will be the one that will have the decision making for everything that goes on with the camping inside of that council. So I wouldn't say it's an authoritarian style. I think authoritarian system, like you said. I think that it's much more cooperative than just an authoritarian style of leadership.
And to build on what Quinton just said too, in your own troop, you have your senior patrol leader, but you also have your patrol leader council. So, you might meet together as a PLC or a patrol leader council in order to discuss upcoming trips and plans and things going on in your troop, and you workshop those types of ideas off of each other. So I don't think it, like Quinton said, it's not necessarily a straight authoritarian system. There could be some authoritarian aspects to it. If you're the leader of your troop and severe weather's coming in and you got to break down camp in the middle of the night to get out of there, you might have to take an authoritarian leadership style to get that task done, but I wouldn't say it's an authoritarian system.
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, and thank you, Brennan and Quinton, for your input. I think we want to basically develop a toolbox of leadership. Throughout this summer, we're going to talk about all kinds of different styles, and I think that, depending on how you look at them and how you apply them, they all are applicable in scouting. I would say that, there are aspects of scouting where that authoritarian system or leadership style are very effective. When we're working with younger scouts who've never set up a tent before and we have to guide them through it, it's a lot more of, one-way communication, like this is how you do it and this is what we're doing next. Maybe when you get to that PLC point, like Brennan was talking about, where it's, all right, what do we want to do for a camping trip this weekend? Okay, who's going to be our adult leaders? Who's going to go? All that kind of stuff, where it's a little bit more collaborative. But it's kind of like, you take baby steps and then you begin to crawl and walk. It's all about learning different types of skills and types of leadership styles that, once you learn them, you can put them in the right situation and apply them correctly. And that way you're going to get really successful results. But like Brennan said too, where you're always looking to improve and be better. So that's not always going to go perfect. There are going to be situations where, you think you have this great plan and they don't really work out. But looking back, maybe talking to older scouts, older Scoutmasters as well are a great source of feedback. Go looking for that too. Don't just think you're doing perfect. What can I do better? I think that's absolutely a great attitude to have. Can you continue to improve? That way you're making yourself better, and you're also making your troop better as a result as well. Something that I really like to stress is that, part of leadership is also developing the next generation. I know when I was a senior patrol leader, I was 16. I became the junior assistant scoutmaster when I was 17. And then when I became an adult, I just took on a different role, and it changed things as far as how I interacted with the rest of the scouts and the troop. So your role as a leader is also to help develop. When you're the senior patrol leader, you're doing things a lot. You're in charge. You're the man of the plan or girl with the plan. But when you transition to that older role, I think you just get a bigger picture. So it's pretty cool to watch, and I'm sure that everyone watching will see that as well. Let's see. We have another question here. What can I do to develop my skills as a leader? What can I do to develop my skills as a leader? Anyone want to take a try at that one?
I'll go for it. So I think that leadership is a skill that needs to be practiced. I don't think that anyone can just take a leadership role on their first try and get it just right. I think it's something that takes time and effort to get right. Figuring out your leadership style. So tonight we're talking about authoritarian leadership style, which is just one of many. But figuring out which one works best for you. Figuring out how you interact with people who work for you, work with you. How you find your workload, like where you pick up slack, where you may be more of a delegator. But those are all things that you don't necessarily know right when you go into it. It's something you can only find out when you're in that situation and you take the reins and you start leading, you're working with the team. And the other thing is all teams are different. So, our team here at camp, we work really well together. We have our system locked down. We've been using it for over 100 years, and scouting in itself is a leadership program. It teaches us to be better leaders. It encourages us to be better leaders. You might step into a real life job, say, I don't know, at a restaurant, right? And you might run into a manager or a boss that might not be that great of a leader because they haven't had that kind of experience that we have the opportunity to have here. So it's something that needs to be practiced. And we have a great opportunity here in Scouts to practice it and to step it up on multiple different levels. Like Brennan kind of mentioned earlier, the troop dynamic. You can start out as a patrol leader and you're helping and working with that small group of scouts. It's you and a tight-knit group, and you do everything together, and you get that opportunity though to delegate and take charge and make decisions with the help of your other patrol leaders and your ASBL and your senior patrol leader. Then once you get comfortable with that, then you work up to higher leadership levels, for example, the assistant senior patrol leader and the senior patrol leader. So I think the best advice that I could give is just take initiative. So when something needs to get done, volunteer to do it, and that'll help get you in a good place, I think, to take some leadership role. So volunteer to help and take whatever opportunity you can to lead. If it's not in scouting right away, say I don't know, in the classroom type of thing. If a teacher asks for somebody to lead the discussion, maybe take that leadership role, try and lead the discussion. That's just like a small way that I can think of that if you're not finding that directly in your troop or whatever. But yeah, just I think it takes practice. It's a muscle that you need to exercise it.
Very good. Thank you, Quentin. Matt or Brennan, do you have anything you'd like to add to that? The question once again is, what can I do to develop my leadership skills or my skills as a leader?
Yeah, just to quickly go over what Q said. Just finding the leadership style that works best for you. Obviously, like you mentioned, that there's a toolbox of leadership styles. You want to be able to kind of switch in between all of them. And like, I'm going to be honest, like the authoritarian leadership style isn't necessarily my favorite, but it is one that I've used before. And just having some experience within it allows me to grow as a person. Like there's many other styles that I might prefer to use, but I know that there's definitely situations in which this is the best or the prime leadership style to go to. But that's about it for me.
My 2 cents on the matter is just finding the time to reflect after every, whether it's a camp out, whether, you're in a job, take a moment to reflect on what happened and how you reacted to situations and the way maybe the scouts or the people you're leading reacted. So take that time to reflect, and that will help you grow. Because if you reflect, you can look back and you can grow upon that. A great leader is always striving for ways to improve and ways to be better and working on it. Knowing you're not a perfect leader, but you want to be, and you're striving to be better. So, whether it's, an evaluation, you sit down and have a conversation with someone above you in the chain of command, or whatever it might be, just having that opportunity to sit down, reflect, and learn from your mistakes. Like, oh, I did this really well, or this didn't really work so well for me. Using an authoritarian leadership style during this instance didn't work well for me, or maybe it did. So having that ability to sit down and build and strive to do better, I always have found has worked best for me. Just taking that time to reflect and always sharpen your skills, because you want to be the best leader you can, and you're not going to be the best leader possible your first time go at it, like Quentin said. It's something you need to use. So just take time to reflect and to work towards being a better leader.
Awesome. That's some awesome advice. Thank you all for sharing. I think our last question for tonight, who are some famous authoritarian leaders? So this is a really great question. I myself am a pretty big sports fan, and I think a really great example might be someone like Bill Belichick, who's the coach of the New England Patriots. Whatever Bill says, that's the law. I think we've heard of the Patriot way. It's really Bill's way. If you don't really fit in very well, then it might not be a great asset to the team. So I think that's kind of a good example where, if whatever Bill says, that's what goes. I think that maybe Brennan, Matt, or Quentin have some other examples of authoritarian leaders they might want to talk about.
Yeah. With what you said, Mitch, like he said, I'm a sports fan too. So recently I watched the Michael Jordan documentary, and Michael Jordan's not shy about it. He kind of says that there's no question about it, he was the leader of that team going through the 90s, and he has regrets about the way he went about some things, but everything that he said on that team went. And like I said, he does have like regrets about like the way that he went about it, but at the same time, you can't even question like the success that those teams had altogether. But I think Michael Jordan would be a great example of an authoritarian leader.
Another great example is probably someone like Bill Gates. Everyone knows who Bill Gates is. He's a spokesperson for his company. Everyone goes to Bill for everything regarding his company. So Bill Gates is another great example of authoritarian leader. There's that one pinnacle person at the top, and like Mitch said, like Bill Belichick, when you think of the leader New England Patriots, you think of Bill Belichick, and you think of Michael Jordan in basketball and with the Chicago Bulls. So any sort of organization you can think of where there's that one person at the top always answering the questions, always the face of the organization, opposed to being a giant group, that's really an authoritarian leader, because they're the ones asking all the questions and taking all that on as a leader. So when you really try and think of that, that's a good way to look at an authoritarian leader in the public's eyes, is someone that's always that person. You know who Bill Gates is and what he does. So that would be my advice on it, or my 2 cents on it.
The one that I got is so the head producer on Saturday Night Live, his name is Lorne Michaels. Lorne Michaels makes all of the decisions for Saturday Night Live. Like I won't say that he makes all the decisions on his own. Like he is very hands-on as a leader, but when it comes down to it, he has the final say. So he has the final say on everybody that gets cast. He has the final say on whatever band plays, whoever hosts, whatever sketches they do. He's in the room. He says, we're doing that, we're not doing that. He has his hands on everything. and he's the one that makes the final call to say whether or not Saturday Night Live will produce something or whether they won't. And that's his authoritarian style. But like I said, he's also very hands-on. He's not just sitting in his office and making the calls without, being a part of the decision-making process. He's very much a part of all of the decision-making processes leading into the final decision that needs to be made. But yeah, Lorne Michaels, head producer of Saturday Night Live.
All right. Thank you all. So that's going to do it for tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to catch us next week, Tuesday at 7 p.m., where we're going to talk about visionary leadership. So thank you all once again and have a great night.